Good evening. Welcome to the forum for candidates in the 2024 general election for Anoka City Council at large. The forum is being recorded by QCTV for multiple showings. Thank you, QCTV. Editing is only authorized for official media reporting excerpts. Edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan political purposes. Meet the Candidates forums are held without a live audience, and voters' questions were submitted online for the candidates. I'm Geri Nelson, the forum moderator, and a member of the League of Women Voters of Anoka, Blaine, Coon Rapids area, the sponsor of this forum. I live in Chaplin, so I can't vote for any of these candidates. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose any political parties or candidates for office. I'm sure these candidates care very much who you vote for, but the League does not. The League does hope that each of you will vote. The goal of our forums is to help citizens become informed voters. The candidates for Anoka City Council at large are Brent Campbell, Jesse Hauf, Heather Rostad, and Jeff Weaver. All the candidates were invited to participate in the forum. 3 of them are here, but Jesse Hauf did not respond to our request. Anoka residents will vote for 2 candidates. The 2 candidates with the most votes will be elected. Welcome to the Anoka City Council at large candidates, Brent Campbell, Heather Rostad, and Jeff Weaver. In lieu of opening statements, we will begin with 2 questions which were provided to the candidates in advance. This will be followed by questions from the public, which were submitted online. Candidates will rotate, answering first. We will end with closing statements from each candidate. For the first 2 questions, the answers are limited to 90 seconds. After that, it will be a 1 minute for every question. So, number 1, what is your motivation for running for office, and what experience or knowledge would help you to serve effectively? And the first person will be Heather Rostad.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this important event. My name is Heather Rostad, and I am thrilled with the opportunity to serve the people of Anoka as a City Council member. I'm a long-term educator, starting my career right here in Anoka, where I taught social studies to nearly a generation of Anokans. I had the pleasure of watching our community's youth grow, learn, and develop into critical thinkers. As an educator, I coordinated service opportunities for students, and I connected them with many civic groups that serve Anoka, instilling the importance of being an active participant in one's community. I've also worked in finance, and I now work for the state as a program consultant. My decision to run for City Council centers around my deep commitment to stewardship and a dedication to public service. As a teacher, I taught my students that a government system is only as effective as it is responsive to its citizens. This means all citizens. Some council leadership have made decisions that do not serve all of Anoka. For example, in the last 10 years, over $20 million have been spent on property purchases for development that had not been planned for or approved. Additionally, the city has had 2 high-profile legal rulings against it for violating both the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act. This has cost the city over $500,000 in damages and resulted in a consent decree by the Justice Department. In addition to creating preventable expenditures, this also creates extra work for city staff to report their complaints back to the Department of Justice. This is not acting as a good steward of our city or in the service to the people of Anoka. As a member of council, I would serve all people responsibly, transparently, and ethically. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Brent Rostad. And the question again is, what is your motivation to run for this office, and what experience or knowledge would help you serve effectively?
Well, good evening. I'm Brent Campbell, and I am a retired Lutheran pastor. I retired about 6 months ago, and just about the time I retired, reading in the Minneapolis Star and Tribune about the city's recent settlement with the Justice Department and 2 lawsuits, one for violating Americans with Disabilities Act and the other for violating fair housing laws. I thought to myself, I think Anoka can do better than that. We're better than that. Every person is entitled to dignity and respect and treated with value. And that was the trigger that got me thinking maybe this is a way that I could serve our community. I graduated from Luther Seminary following undergraduate work with a degree in theology, and spent 37 years as a parish pastor serving mostly large churches in Wisconsin and Minnesota. And during that time, I had the opportunity to manage church budgets, to hire and supervise large church staffs, and to do long-range planning and strategic planning, all things that I think would be very helpful in serving on a city council and helping a city to move toward a future.
Thank you. Jeff Weaver, what is your motivation to run for this office, and what experience or knowledge would help you serve effectively?
The motivation to run for the office is Anoka's a diamond. It has so many unique, positive entities and resources. You've got amazing neighborhoods, strong, cohesive neighborhoods. You've got an amazing business park. You have a historic downtown. And most of all, we've got two iconic rivers that run through our town that offer all types of recreational opportunities for our residents to enjoy. One of the reasons that I want to be on the council is to keep polishing that diamond, because it always has challenges. There's no question that we have challenges every day, and I like to be able to solve those challenges by getting outside the box and bringing new ideas to the town. We've brought in the new social district. That's been wonderful. The outside dining has been wonderful in the downtown restaurant area. You've got the storm that we just had last week on Thursday, and many residents were hit. Our Public Services Department was able to get out and help residents get their debris picked up. Huge, immense help, and that is part of why I want to be on the City Council, is make sure our residents and business owners can be successful, because when they're successful, so is the city.
Thank you. This next question is, what are your goals for Anoka's future? And we'll start with Brent Rostad.
It's Brent Campbell.
Brent Campbell, I'm sorry.
Well, I have 3 or 4 primary goals. The first one is to work on fiscal responsibility in Anoka. I think the City Council spending patterns for the last probably decade is not sustainable in the long run. A simple example, just last week, the City Council voted 3-2 to purchase an industrial property near the golf course, which some know as the Bullduck property. And the city paid 4 times the assessed value for that property, $2.3 million, and borrowed or drew from various city funds for the first $1.3 million. And the balance of $1 million was hard to come up with, and so they did a land contract with the owner of the property. So next year, the council will have to come up with another $1 million and $70,000 in interest. There are other examples, but that is the primary example, or the most recent example. Another priority would be to prioritize police and fire protection. We have, I think, an excellent police department in Anoka. We need to continue to prioritize their work. Adequate funding for park maintenance. Unfortunately, we've deferred maintenance for many of the improvements needed in our area parks. Peninsula Park is a good example. So park maintenance, prioritizing police and fire, and fiscal responsibility are my priorities.
Thank you. Heather Rostad, what are your goals for Anoka's future?
Like Brent, my primary goal is to prioritize fiscal responsibility and then transparency and accountability regarding how tax dollars are spent. As he mentioned, property purchases without plans or allocated funds is not responsible development. And another example near the golf course includes the purchase of the Highland Park properties over the last 10 years that held about 34 homes, apartment buildings that had a value of nearly $10 million. Those properties were torn down and nothing has been done with it. These properties are now off the tax rolls, and the city is responsible for maintaining this. Again, not fiscally responsible. Once this excessive spending has been brought under control, the council can focus on the meat and potatoes elements of what matters to citizens, improving the infrastructure and quality of life, such as public safety, roads, sidewalks, trails, and parks, which are often the first items on the chopping block when the budget gets tight. The emergency response that we saw last week shows how effective and efficient our city can function. These services shouldn't rely on a shoestring budget when they provide those key services that are needed to run our city effectively and safely. I would like to see continued development in the social district and creating spaces that bring people and families together from all over and have it be bike and pedestrian friendly. People come from everywhere to enjoy our restaurants, businesses, and all the events, and to continue to grow this vision is my priority as well.
Thank you. Jeff Weaver, what are your goals for Anoka's future?
Of course, you're going to start off with a good kitchen table budget, because you cannot spend more than you take in. That's just number one. But then we've heard a lot of talk about property purchases. The property purchase west of the golf course was part of a Housing and Redevelopment Authority commission called the Greens of Anoka that dates back many years, well over a decade. And when those properties, when that plan was put in place by the HRA, people just swarmed to sell their houses. It was quite a unique experience. I heard Mr. Campbell talk a little bit about the purchase of Bolduc. Well, that property sits right in the middle of that development. That's going to allow this property to get on the market now and be sold. And that is one of my goals, is to get some of these properties that have been purchased, including the Bolduc property and the Greens of Anoka property, and actually get this sold. And I think I made that pretty clear at our last council meeting. There's also a big block of property that's between 4th and 6th and Grant and Johnson that has a huge, going to have a huge impact up by the commuter rail station. It was an old industrial building that was purchased. I voted no on the initial purchase of that, but it was bought, and it has the potential to really bring a lot of new, vibrant, and energy to a part of town that was lacking and needed some new growth. The only reason Anoka is going to be moving forward and creating new tax revenue is by reinvesting and redeveloping older, tired properties in town.
Thank you. Okay, our first question that came from the public. Jeff Weaver will start on this one. Anoka is granted an abundance of money. What would be your 3 top projects? This is assuming.
Assuming we're granted a bunch of money, a pot of money
money
falls, and what do we do? Well, it's very interesting is the police department, through some of the funds that were part of the COVID monies, received, I believe, about $750,000. And those funds were given for retention of existing officers, and then a lot of that went to offset body camera purchases. So that was about $750,000. Other monies would be probably put into roads and bridges. We're always struggling. Anoka has a very strong SRP program, street renewal project. That's where we come in and do complete infrastructure, do water, sewer, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, the whole 9 yards. We always try to keep our assessment somewhere between 21 and 25%. And another program that we instituted maybe 5-6 years ago was an SSIP program, Street Surface Improvement Program. That was started when we had an original $1 million slated for Greenhaven, and instead we didn't do the renewal, and we put it into doing street resurface projects in neighborhoods that didn't need infrastructure.
Thank you. Heather Rostad, assuming Anoka is granted abundance of money, what would be your 3 top priorities?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would take a real good look at our public safety. I know that the fire collaborates with the Champlain area, and so making sure that they have the resources they need. That stuff is incredibly expensive. They have a huge response rate and are very, very, very efficient with what they have, and I would like to make sure that they continue to have what they need. Same with the police. We need to make sure that we keep this very professional, elite police funded and make sure that they can hire and retain folks. It's become a very competitive market for police officers in different areas, and I would like to know that Anoka can keep up with those salaries and wages across the board. Additional training that they could have would be great as well. Mr. Weaver referenced infrastructure. That as well, I think, is important. And I'd also like to see additional accessibility around Anoka. We have a very diverse population that is aging, and it would be nice to make sure that everything was as accessible as it could be for citizens.
Thank you. Brent Campbell, what would be your three top projects if you had an abundance of money?
Well, I think both Jeff and Heather have touched on some really valuable ideas, but some of the ideas I would have would complement theirs. I think that some of our parks are tired and in need of updating the playgrounds and improving the trails. I'd like to see us really work. We have a wonderful park system and perhaps more parks for the size of our city than most other cities in Minnesota. So I would like to see us really focus on our parks. Secondly, I would like to see us some of the parts of our community where the streets are really in disrepair, really need resurfacing and upgrading the infrastructure. I'd like to see us to be able to go ahead with some of those. There aren't a lot, but there are some that really need it. And I would also say that I think our fire department probably needs additional full-time staff. It's largely a volunteer fire department, but as our city continues to grow and the needs increase, our combined fire department with Champlin could probably use additional fire department staff. So those would be my three.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Brent. Do you own rental property in Anoka? If so, how many? And is it residential or commercial or both? Brent.
No, I don't. Actually, the bank owns our house too.
Okay.
We still have a mortgage, so I don't. We've lived in Anoka for 9 years, and currently our home is our only property.
Okay. Jeff Weaver.
Yes, I do. We run a small family business that's been located in the same office on Main Street for over 70 years. And we are in the residential business and commercial business in the city of Anoka. We provide opportunities for businesses to flourish and be successful, and residents to flourish by trying to keep our rents and rates lower than others so people can be successful. I use the same philosophy in our business, that if our tenants and customers can be successful, so is the business. It's no different than with the community. If the taxes are affordable to the residents and they're successful, so is the city. Just easy business pattern.
Thank you. Heather Rostad, do you own any property and what is it like?
I own one very old home that happens to be across the street from Brent, some of the older homes in Anoka, and that's it. And technically, again, the bank would own that as well.
Okay, the next question is Heather will start. Do you support funding a driving range at Greenhaven Golf Course? If so, how would it be funded?
That's a great question. I think that we need to address some of these other bigger financial concerns. Once those other items have been addressed, then for sure we could have a driving range, but I don't see that as an immediate need for the city. I also see that as something that doesn't suit the needs of all of the city. That's one slice of a population that doesn't serve everyone. Brent mentioned parks, other infrastructure, public safety. Those seem to be far more important driving concerns for me than a driving range.
Brent Campbell, do you support a driving range at Greenhaven, and how would you fund it?
Well, I would someday support a driving range at the golf course. You know, I think we have other priorities first. I think we need to sell some of the existing property that's owned by the city, some of the land around the Highland Park neighborhood for future development, and develop the property at the center of the city, the Miller property that's next to the railroad. And I think that will replenish a lot of the city funds, including building up the reserve. So I could see that as a future project. I know that could probably cost a few $1 million, and the city doesn't have that at this time. So, and I think it should be funded largely through the proceeds of the golf course too, so.
Thank you. Jeff Weaver, what do you think about a driving range at Greenhaven?
A guy who doesn't golf one bit, I might be driving the beverage cart, but I don't golf. But do I support the golf course and a driving range? Absolutely, and here's why. The golf course profited $145,000 this year. That's it. It had $840,000 in equipment needs and capital needs, plus another $400,000 in golf cart needs. So they had a request of $1,002,000. That does not work when you have $145,000 in profit. So the golf course, if it's going to be sustainable into the future, and I see the golf course in the city of Anoka, besides it's being historic and being a WPA project, needs to find other sources of revenue, and that's going to be one way to do it. And I think the studies would show that a driving range will help pay for that improvement to the golf course.
Thank you. Brent Campbell, you're first on this next question. What would be your reaction to proposals that come to the council from the city staff?
That's a great question. Well, I think we would seriously consider a request or proposal from the city staff the way that we would from a resident. They know the city well, and I think that it should be something that would be looked at, but we would need to do our homework and our research, and I think we would need to visit with citizens, residents, and see how they feel about it. So it would need to be something that's researched and listen to the voters. But I think we have a very dedicated city staff, as Jeff mentioned, with the storm cleanup, and so it's something I think should be taken seriously.
Thank you. Jeff Weaver, what's your reaction to proposals by city staff?
You know, staff brings forward ideas all the time. We talked about one on Tuesday night where staff has done a business plan for the sale of marijuana. And their business plan is for the sale at Greenhaven, of all places. And it's going to take a lot of discussion. There's a lot of, it's a legal product, and we must admit that it's a legal product, but, you know, I think our discussion is going to be, is this the best place to have it? Should the city have employees that are selling marijuana, or should this be done by the private industry? So staff has brought this forward. That's just one example, but it does happen, and it creates great discussion.
Thank you. Heather Rostad.
Figured out how we're going to pay for that driving range. But in all seriousness, the staff are experts in their field, and I think one of the biggest mistakes systems can make is not listening to people who are closest to the ground on those issues. Bringing appropriate subject matter experts, stakeholders in at the right time when they have that input and ideas, I think it's really critical to listen to them. They are oftentimes, like the city staff, they're hearing from the public. And so I take that very seriously when city staff are bringing issues to other folks, because they're the first line of defense. They're not always going to get a council member or the mayor first grab, but they are going to get someone who answers the phone at City Hall. And so I think it's really important, if they have found an issue that needs attention, that the city council should listen and listen carefully.
Thank you. Heather, you'll be first on this next question. Many Anoka parks have overgrown grass and weeds, crumbling buildings, etc. What will you do to remedy this?
Well, if we had a greater surplus of resources, I would love to see some of these parks refurbished. The senior center is a great one. That particular area that doesn't serve very many people well. The floor I know is going to be replaced soon, but it's not very attractive. It's an eyesore, and it's really centrally located. I would love to see these parks reused. We have a new Anoka kind of overturning. We have more families and kids in our neighborhoods than we have in recent years, and they deserve safe places to be. And that's a liability for the city and a responsibility for them to make sure that it's taken care of. One way or another, we're going to have to fix it. And taking some time and money to make infrastructure choices that allow that to happen is important.
Thank you. Jeff Weaver, how would you remedy the parks that are hurting?
Park funding is is a real challenge, because the city of Anoka's model has always been to have an infusion of cash from the profits of the liquor stores. With the Highway 10 construction, the West Liquor Store was closed and sold, and the East Liquor Store pretty much breaks even. The only funding that's coming in to the parks right now is through the rental of the docks that are in the river, and that just doesn't do it. So we have to find some new funding sources, and that's really critical, to find new funding sources for the parks. Heather mentioned about some of the challenges. I look at the tennis courts, and I see the trend towards pickleball. We need to be resurfacing some of these courts and making them pickleball friendly to those that like it, because it's a real big draw for the seniors and some of the older folks. So there's all kinds of things we can do. It's going to be the funding source that for the parks that's going to be our biggest challenge, and will be.
Thank you. Brent Campbell, what about the city parks?
Well, I don't have a whole lot to add to what Heather and Jeff have said, except to say that I do think it's sad when we've spent over between 27 and 28 million buying up property around town, even if it's for redevelopment, and 2.3 million for a property for the future for the golf course, when we really don't have any money to do anything with it yet, and yet our parks are in disrepair. We had a gathering at one of the parks here a month or so ago, and they have brand new restrooms there that are really nice, but they were locked up because they don't have the money for the staff to clean up the bathrooms. So I think that there's just something wrong with the system where we can find money for property, but we haven't been able to find it for years for park repair, and that we've relied on the liquor store proceeds. So I really think we do need to find another way to budget for parks. So,
Thank you. Jeff Weaver, you're the first one on this next question. Should banks and or corporations be allowed to own or purchase residential housing in Anoka? Why or why not?
Should banks be allowed to buy? I don't know of any cases where a bank has bought unless it's foreclosed on a property. So anytime a bank has an interest in a property through a mortgage, they have a right to that property if there is a foreclosure or some type of legal action. But I don't know of any situations where banks are coming in to buy houses. I really don't.
Okay, Brent Campbell, should banks or corporations be allowed to own or purchase residential housing in Anoka? Why or why not?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, I think I concur with Jeff. I'm not aware that banks are allowed to do that unless they're taking over a property that was foreclosed on. We live in a free market system, so capitalist system, and that's how we operate. So I don't know that it's up to the city to start discriminating against who can buy a piece of property and who can't. I think that's a state or a federal policy, not ours.
Right. Okay, Heather Rostad.
Yeah, I would reiterate what these other two gentlemen have said. I would suggest that in terms of a corporation, I wouldn't support that. There's this issue with having affordable housing in Minnesota and nationally. And so getting homes in the hands of people to develop them and to live in them, I think that it's a basic right to be housed. And I would like to see that as something that is available to as many people as possible in our community.
Thank you. Okay, Jeffrey Weaver, should the residential rental housing density in Anoka be changed? If so, how?
That's a great question, because right now the non-owner occupied to owner occupied ratio is at about 50%, 50% rental, 50% owner occupied. And I think the rate that is ideal is somewhere in the upper 20s to about 30%. So how do we do that? Is to try to, we've done a rental density by block throughout the town, so homes can't be purchased for rental purposes. There's so many licenses on each block. On these new redevelopment areas, or what we did at Rum River Shores, those are all owner-occupied. Rivers Point, owner-occupied. There's going to be some development opportunities west of the golf course. That should all be owner-occupied. And it's just that ratio needs to change a little bit and be more owner-occupied. You're going to find when you have owner-occupied neighborhoods, you have stronger cohesive neighborhoods for the betterment of the community.
Heather Rostad, should the residential rental housing density at Anoka be changed? If so, how?
You know, I'd have to really look into this more, but I'm inclined to agree with Jeff on this one, that like the own your occupied rate is important, and people feel invested in spaces that they have ownership in. And Anoka, face it, is a fantastic place to live. I can't blame for people for wanting to be here. I moved myself here because I was so impressed by the community system that it offers. But that said, making sure that we have affordable and available housing is critical. By increasing our rental density is going to be really difficult to bring more people in as homeowners.
Thank you. Brent Campbell.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add except to say that I think there is a housing shortage in most communities in our country, and especially an affordable housing shortage. And so it may be something the city needs to really study and figure out what the right combination of housing density is to increase the availability of affordable housing. I also think there really is a particular need for affordable housing among young families and among senior citizens. I was approached by 3 elderly widows who recently had lost their husbands and needed to move out of their homes. And there's a lot of senior housing, but it tends to be upscale. There isn't really a lot that's affordable in Anoka. So I do think we need to do something to address affordable housing. I'm not sure what the right breakdown is for the breakdown for rentals and ownership.
Okay. Brent Campbell, you're first on this question. What is your position on organized waste hauling? How will residents know they are getting the best deal? Mm-hmm. What information should voters receive to make an informed decision?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, in August, during the primary, I voted in favor of the change in the city charter to allow the voters to make a decision on organized hauling or whether we remain with our current system. And in November, we will now have the chance for the voters to make that decision, whether they want to keep the current system or whether they prefer an organized approach to hauling. And I think that voters should get all the information they need to make an informed decision. They should know what the true cost is and be able to make the best decision for themselves and for the community. And as an elected official, I would abide by and support whatever decision the voters make on November 5th.
Thank you. Next is Heather Rostad.
Like Brent said, in August, voters decided that they wanted to change the city charter and have this question be in front of citizens. And so that's great. On November, folks can go ahead and decide on what they want, if they want single hauler or if they want a multiple choice option. I think it's very critical at this point for the city to make sure that citizens have the information they need. Right now, the city is taking bids from other different haulers, and next week those will be due, those requests for proposals. And then the city will consolidate that information and share it with the voters. So I think it's incredibly important that the city shares transparently what it is that those opportunities are, what the price breakdown is, so it's very clear. I'm very much needing to have a lot of information on this. I hope citizens have an open mind when they see that information. And whatever the voters decide is what I will support in November.
Thank you. Jeff Weaver, what is your position on organized waste hauling? How will residents know they're getting the best deal? And what information should voters receive to make an informed decision?
Again, Heather and Brett have both stated that November 5th is going to be very telling what the residents are going to say and do. I'm going to support whatever the position is that the voters say that they would like to see, and that's the reason for the August 13th primary question was to get that on the ballot. It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. The city right now has an attrition policy. Yes, I'm for reducing trucks on the streets. There's no question about it. How we go about it is two different pieces of the puzzle. But the city does have an attrition policy which has reduced licenses. We have had six residential haulers. We're down to 4. That's reduced trucks. But there are 7 commercial license haulers right now, and this ballot question does not affect the commercial licenses. So there's just a lot of questions to that, but it's going to be interesting to see which way the wind blows on November 5th.
Thank you. Heather Rostad, you'll be first on how should household composting and yard waste be handled?
Well, I'm a big fan, I'll just say right off the bat, and I think it's super efficient to be able to do that and have the little sort that you get from the waste reduction group and bring it up to the site off of 7th Avenue. I think in the future, I think it would be lovely if we had an opportunity to have a pickup opportunity for that. That's sometime in the future. That's another trash question for another day. But I love the idea of encouraging folks to be responsible with their waste. Once you get started, it's very easy, and it's honestly become a challenge for our family to see how little waste we can throw out.
Thank you. Jeff Weaver, how should household composting and yard waste be handled?
Great question, and the city is very active with their recycling and the composting program. At our house, my wife takes quite a few trips with yard waste and other things out to the compost site at Anoka County. So there are options, whether it's in the city of Anoka or Anoka County. So there's no reason for anybody to be just dumping everything into the trash bin to go out. There's ways to sort that and ways to make a better impact on our environment.
Thank you. Brent Campbell. Household hazardous waste or household composting and yard waste.
Yeah, it's hard to think of too much to add to what Heather and Jeff have said. The only thought that I have is I grew up in Central California in a farming community, and my maternal grandfather owned a 40-acre vineyard, and back in the 50s and 60s, he composted and recycled before people even knew what the term was, and so I grew up with that mentality. And so anything the city can do to encourage us to be better stewards of the earth and our environment, I would be in favor of. And a major city initiative may be needed to encourage more composting.
Right. Okay. This next question may be the last, actually, and it's a really long one, so listen carefully. QCTV provides community news and information, live sports coverage, live government meetings with closed captioning, religious programming, community event shows, business highlights, and elections programming like this candidate forum. Cable TV franchising and related fees to use the public right-of-way by cable providers such as Comcast have a 50-year history in Minnesota assuring digital equity. Full build-out, service standards, and dedicated funding for public programming. Last legislative session, the Equitable Access to Broadband Act was introduced to provide for the same goals for broadband digital equity as an option by cities, an opt-in by cities wanting to franchise broadband providers. Would you support this legislation and the work done by QCTV? Why or why not? Jeff Weaver.
It's a great question, and it's a very challenging question. I look forward to watching Anoka Tornadoes football tonight on QCTV because it's on their YouTube channel. It's a great way to catch the game if you're not there in person. But I hear often that folks aren't able to watch QCTV or the council meetings because they don't have cable. They're streaming, and they're doing other forms of how they're getting their television into their homes, and the local channels aren't on it, and the QCTV is not on it. So I think that challenge is a huge one as technology takes us away from being wired to an actual outlet where you can turn to channel 16 and watch the TV. I think this challenge is going to probably get tougher and tougher with time and more technology.
Thank you. Brent Campbell, what is your opinion of this? I don't have to repeat it, do I?
No.
Thank you.
I would support that legislation wholeheartedly because I think that public TV plays an important part in our society and our communities. I would concur with Jeff that it is a complicated issue, and we need to find a way to address, folks that don't have cable TV, and how can we expand into their living rooms too, so they benefit from a service like QCTV. So,
Thank you. Heather Rostad.
I concur with Brent next to me here. I think this is a critical resource to citizens. They need to be able to learn and get information. But there is a challenge in doing that when so many people are streaming things. But information is an incredibly powerful tool to help inform citizens. And I am for as much opportunity for folks to be informed as possible. So I would support that.
Thank you. Okay, we're at the time where we'll have closing statements of 1 minute. And we will start with Brent Campbell.
okay. First of all, I want to thank QCTV and the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to introduce myself to the voters of Anoka. And I would like to say that I believe that my lifetime of serving as a pastor and volunteering in a number of nonprofits and serving on nonprofit boards has equipped me with many of the skills and experiences and abilities to bring people together, to address some of the challenges that we face in Anoka in the years ahead, and to be part of planning for a brighter future for our city. If I am elected in November, I commit to being an independent voice on the council, to being accessible to all residents, regardless of who they are or where they live, and to being a good steward of every tax dollar and all the resources that we have at our disposal as in our wonderful community of Anoka. And I thank you for this event tonight and for your consideration and for your vote in November.
Thank you. Jeff Weaver.
I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting together this forum to let the candidates express their thoughts and opinion. Anoka has a long tradition of keeping its tax burden to the taxpayers who both reside and do business in Anoka at an affordable rate, even while providing the outstanding services we all cherish, admire, and expect. Strong, cohesive neighborhoods are the backbone of great communities. Protecting the integrity of our single-family neighborhoods by being able to make tough decisions when it comes to zoning and other related housing issues will always be a top priority. Preserving Anoka's rich history and traditions are constant challenges which need a strong city council member who can think outside the box. I am always up to that challenge and take great pride in how the city just saved in partnership and with the leadership of the HPC, which I was a founding member of the two stone fireplaces by Goodrich and Aiken Riverside Park. Being a public service is a privilege I have taken very seriously. Come November, I would be honored to earn your vote again. My name is Jeff Weaver, and I'm running for re-election to the Anoka City Council.
Thank you. Heather Rostad.
All right, thanks again to the League of Women Voters and also to QCTV for putting this on for us today. And thanks so much for everyone for listening tonight. Anoka has to strike a good balance between a sustainable economic growth and responsible fiscal management and serving the unique character of our city. I'll do this by prioritizing transparency, citizen engagement, and thoughtful long-term planning to ensure our city thrives for generations to come. I'll do this in collaboration with the City Council by engaging in strategic planning, purposeful spending, and listening to what our community wants for our city. I know that I have the skills and desire to make this happen along with other city leaders. I believe my passion for Anoka is clear, whether through my career as a social studies teacher or the efforts to engage the youth in politics and local government. I understand the importance of listening to citizens and bringing the community's voice into the decision-making process. I value responsible economic growth, transparent leadership, and a commitment to making and keeping Anoka as a safe and thriving place for all, and I would be honored to have your support. Thank you.
League of Women Voters thanks the candidates for speaking to voters about issues and for running for City Council at large. Thanks, viewers, and those who submitted questions. Links to all the forums for local candidates are located at lwvabcmn.org. The general election is November 5th. Early voting starts September 28th. You can vote early at Anoka City Hall or Anoka County Elections Office. Please see the City of Anoka website for additional information. You can register to vote update your registration, and find information on voting options, and find your polling place online at mnvotes.org or the Minnesota Secretary of State website. Also look for candidate information at Vote 411, and I encourage each of you candidates to put your answers to the questions there so that voters have another option to find out more about you. You can also register or update your registration at your polling place on Election Day. If you're interested in the League of Women Voters, visit our website at lwvabcmn.org. Women and men of age 16 and older are welcome to join. Your vote is your voice. Make your voice heard by voting in the general election. Thank you so much and good night.